Let's see if YouTube is going to work for us today. See if my computer is going to work properly for us. Looks like we've got a connection. Come on, YouTube. Tell me what you got. A little laggy right now. Looks like we've got a connection. All right, so YouTube is up and running. We have good audio. Looks like the stream is healthy. We had a little bit of a bug getting yesterday's video posted. It actually just posted like a little while ago. So I'm hopeful that today's edition will go a little smoother. Interesting. Yeah, I'm hopeful that the live stream, it does appear to be working fine. So sometimes I get myself confused, which shouldn't surprise anybody. If you've watched this show before, I pretty much am constantly confused. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get this going because we've got so much stuff to do today. I do see that CouchBot has fired, so it's saying that we are live in the Discord channel. If you're watching the playback on this, just know that you can find out whenever we're going live or whenever we post new videos. But either you can subscribe to YouTube or you can come in and join the Discord new Pragmatic community and talk with us about the design work that you're doing. Tonight, we have a live session open to the public. It's office hours, after hours, or is it after hours, office hours? I think it's office hours, after hours. Anyway, that starts at 7:30 p.m. Central, and we're specifically focusing on the job search. This is hiring season. What are the steps that you need to do to put yourself in the best position to make the big push forward? And there is a checklist. There will be a test at the end. No, there will not be a test at the end. The test ultimately is, do you get a job? And but I will be providing that checklist. So join us for that tonight. A link is in, oddly enough, the Discord channel, or over on Twitter, or over on LinkedIn. We've kind of spread that out there. Also, the hoodies are in. Get your designer hoodie. I'll be sharing details how you might get your hands on one of these new Pragmatic designer hoodies in the coming weeks ahead. Some of you are already getting one, and you'll see a new video on testimonials from students floating out there. Those hoodies will be out to those individuals shortly. Thank you for everybody who participated. But with that said, let's get this underway. Greetings, one and all. Chris Courtney here, New Pragmatic. It's time for the feedback loop. I am a designer, and I'm so glad to have you along for this episode of the program. We've got, goodness gracious, we got a Ricardo in here. We got Bren in here. Eddie's in here. Abraham's in here. Maddie's in here. Busy, busy, busy middle of the week. It is almost like everybody said, hey, I guess it's time to go back to work. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen, and let's get this going. And so right here we have Ricardo. Ricardo's working on his color for navigation exercises, and color for navigation is so different from color for accessibility. And color for navigation, we're specifically looking at, okay, so how are we using color? What are the colors that are really driving this design? There's a couple of different ways to look at this. One, when you're talking about a dominant color on something like this color scheme in this first site, the dark blues pop out. Also, I'll say we have light blue, blue, and then dark blue. The blues pop out, but so do the dark blues. The dark blues are being used for all the typography and the action button. So the call to actions are getting that dark blue as well. But I will say that there's a lot of blue that's really driving this design. There's also some secondary colors. The yellows and greens are here. And when we begin talking about like what type of color scheme is this, well, the driving force for this is really the blues. It's heavily leaning toward monochrome, but because we have the yellows and the greens, and we have just a slight picture of this red, and the red appears like down here under the hardway. It's almost like a warning color. Um, I would really say that this is more analogous, while there is a little bit of red that moves you over on the color wheel. And I just want to actually bring a color wheel in here for a second. Let's go find one. I typically have one on my desktop. When you look at this, and you look at what we have over here with regard to the colors, you're really living like right here, and these all move in a line, like the greens, the blues, the greens, the yellows. They're all analogous. They're basically one half of the wheel all working together. And then you've got this little spot of red. I really don't consider the red to be a primary factor here in the overall design. So I would really look at this as more analogous. This color scheme, basically, it's blues, greens, yellows, and it kind of stays within that range. This is kind of like talking about typography, in that I want you to know what an ascender is, I want you to know what a descender is, I want you to know what the baseline grid is. I would like for you to know, just on a whim, oh, these colors move in a line. These are analogous to one another. The blues over to the yellows. The reds are complementary to the green. And, if I had an orange in here, it would be complementary to the blue. So understanding how the wheel works, and just like developing a natural awareness of it, is going to help you explain why some colors are working better together than others. Another thing that's interesting here is the concept of tone. When you look at the tone for the blues, the greens, the yellows, the reds, the dark blue, these are all working together, but this almost electric blue really steps away from those. And I think that's why this is feeling like the dominant color. It's the one thing that's utilizing a different tone. If we come over and we look at this one and this design, the question I have here is, this taupe is more of really a background. When we think about, okay, there's some greens here, there's some reds here, the saturation of this red that you have as the first supporting color, that really stands out to me to be the dominant, because it's being used for emphasis all the way through. Like if I want to emphasize anything, draw attention to like the icons down below. I'm using it over and over again. There are some usages of the red here on these screens, but overall, I really think that this is more the dominant color as far as what's popping off the page. But regardless, this is more of a complementary scheme, because you've got the subtle greens and the subtle reds, and those work across from one another. It's almost, but if you took this one out of it, it'd be very neutral or pastel presentation. Here, this is a really hard color scheme to get a handle on. You've basically almost got to you got to block out this, basically what is an ad. And it's amazing. Like at one point in time, we had like conferences that we went to. But if you look at it here, this is again, as you rightly pointed out, with the absence of that red, this is the yellows over to the purples. It's just a little beyond the blue, but it's really all to one side of the color wheel, and the tone is all the same. So they're very much utilizing color to organize this information. Again, this red. When you pull that red out, the design doesn't really bother me at all. I think it's very clean. It's well constructed. When you have this red in here, it's like Jesus. So maybe that was just an ad. Um, so a rare misstep for brand new. Here, monochromatic, nailed it. You know, it's the greens. Really clean design work overall. Everything kind of lives within the same color palette. The you know you could dive in here and say, oh well, this has a little bit of blue in it, and that would be true, but it's subtle. And then over here we have this color scheme, and you've rightly marked it as other because the scheme itself moves all over the place. Like there's reds and blues and greens. It's like, what is the scheme? The scheme is the color wheel. What's important here is the tone. Okay, all the supporting colors are of the same tone, and that's why they work together. But this dominant color here, this color that you've identified as the action color, the color we're using for navigation, it's a brighter tone than the others. It is this is very much stepping away. It does not does not feel like it's being pushed back at all. It feels like it's stepping out away, and that's why I think you've done the right thing by calling it your dominant color here. Even though there's lots of other colors you could be utilizing, it's the one that keeps coming up. A call to action, call to action, call to action. So good job there. I want to take a look at exercise 2. This is really where you're trying to put these things into motion. I do feel like you're calling a lot of attention to areas that don't really require, like I don't require the dark green on the status bar across the top, and it's not really a dark green. It's just it's a lot of color, and you did the same thing over here. I think if you actually get rid of that, this is typically what we tend to see. And if you did the same thing here, where you just turned it off. Well, actually, I can't turn the entire layer off, Chris. That's not really a great idea, but I can do that. That's typically what we see. And the reason that we see that is, you know, one thing you're not seeing here is the notch. The notch comes down into that space. We don't want to call attention to the fact that there's a notch there, so a lot of people just let that color go, or they let the dominant background go all the way to the top. So I would probably not have that background behind the status bar. And the same thing can be said down here, although this is a bit more optional. Okay, I definitely don't want to call attention to the notch and whatnot up here, but down here, this is more of a stylistic play. The question is, does my color selection here muddy the fact that I've got, and I guess to do this the other way would have to be just make it clear. Am I able to clearly see that this is the page that is selected, or can I clearly see that with the green behind it? I think it's a little easier to see when it's a more subtle tone like that. I think it's easier to see that this is the selected color, and that then becomes a question of, okay, so does that mean that the notifications are active? Does that mean that this bank up here is active? Should this be green, or is green reserved for a usage of? Is green reserved for some other usage on the site? I don't know. I don't think the purple is it. So I think that your color, your idea here is to have that darker, and that means that it's active, and that's fine. But is it easier to see when we don't have that green back there, and then again back up when we go back to the top? We're just calling too much attention to that compared to the rest of the information. So I think there's some question about the header and footer. We talked about this. I think everything else here is pretty much okay. I can see where these might be eking into the realm of having accessibility issues because they're getting too they have a color, and that color is on a dark background, and now the saturation is it's fading into that background. I think otherwise your usage is fine, especially for like a dark mode. um, it is interesting that what you used before for like this is active and these are the same color. Now these are white and this is in the active retained what it retained a color. So it's like whatever's happening here changed, but from here to here. So which is it? Should this not have a color? Should this be like a gray? Or should it have or should this actually be the green? Which are they active or aren't they active? And I know that I'm asking you questions about the design. You're like, I just got the shapes, but I'm asking, okay, are these active or not? That's the only question that I'm presenting you with here. Okay. Let's move over here to Bryn. Bryn, you are working on the existing components exercise, and I think it's really well done. Particularly if we hide away the guides for a second and begin looking at this. It's really clean. The information is very clear. You have this slider of sorts. I'm not really certain that that's a interaction. I can see this interaction on mobile, like, oh, I want to swipe across. I'm not sure it works on a desktop, but you did have a question about, okay, how would I make this occur? And I just want to kind of come up here and paste it in and just take a look at it. Why won't it let me copy the whole thing? Okay, I guess I probably have to copy the whole thing. Okay, so here's the whole deal. And right now it looks like you've got like a fade on the end. I'm just trying to see where this fade has been created at. It's probably... Is it on? No, it's not there. I'm not really sure where this fade is coming from. But one thing I do know is that if you want this to overflow right, and so much of that is pulling this in, and it looks like the fade is actually on the shape itself, which it's an inner shadow. It's an inner shadow. Okay, so it's not an applied color at all. But this fade, what we're really looking for here on tabs, and I'm going to make this a frame so that we can hopefully see it really fast. Let's go into prototype mode, and I don't think everything is well, let's see here. Okay, so it's not working as it stands. Alright, let's come back over. I just need this frame to get into the prototype somehow. I'm just going to throw it over here for a second. Okay, so typically speaking, we should be able to scroll this side to side when... And I'm certain that I have, okay, so it says overflow behavior, no scrolling, horizontal scrolling. All right, so what I'm looking to have happen here is for this to scroll side to side, and right now it's on the frame, so I've probably got this on the wrong bit at the moment. So I do. So I've got it on the frame, and I don't necessarily want it on the frame, so I'm going to undo horizontal scrolling for that. I'm going to come in and I'm basically going to copy that out. I'm going to make this into a frame itself. I'm going to frame that selection. As you can see, there's still more there. I should be able to say, okay, now, okay, so how can we do this? I've got frame 69. The tabs container is within that. I'm wanting the tabs container to scroll. So maybe that's the problem. I just need the tab. Oh, okay. Interesting. I need to restructure this because that's the scrollable asset right there, not these others. So I'm going to I've done it again. Okay, here's okay. So I think I might have the idea here. If I drag, here we go. No tabs container. Okay. Here's the bit that I want to scroll, right? But I need this frame to essentially say, okay, and I understand your arrow is not there, but I need this frame to basically say, all right, I'm the frame. I want to clip the content. Then I want to come back over here and I want to say horizontal scrolling. So there's more over here. Now, let's take a look at it. Yes, okay. So what's important here is that the frame itself that's the piece that needs to you need to be able to clip the content. That's the first part of this. The second part of this is in the prototype mode, you need to be able to set this to horizontal scrolling. If you can't do that, and the problem here is I was trying to do that within the frame. And the problem there is I don't get the ability to do horizontal scrolling that far down. I do see that I can clip content, but it's not quite the same. You need to do that at that top level. And if you can get to that point, then you can do horizontal scrolling like that. And I know that was a question that you had, and it is a bit convoluted because like you have to remember you have to clip the content first, and then you have to set it to horizontal scrolling. I think you could actually do it the other way, but I'm not sure it's going to make any sense if I'm not clipping the content. Let's see. And I'm completely wrong. You can have that totally just hanging out there. But Figma is only going to pay attention to the frame. So that's interesting. The question now becomes, for me, like if we grabbed this and we threw it back down into the middle of this design, is that going to still work? So I'm going to drag this back over here. Going to delete that. Going to delete that. Let's come back over here and let's look at this. And interesting, it does some weird little like wobbly thing. It's way too big. So let's take a look at this to understand what's going on. So that's set to horizontal scrolling, and that's great. I want to clip the content, and now I want to. Oh, okay. That's where clip content comes in. I knew that had to be there. All right, so now we can scroll, but it is a frame, but the problem that you've got right now is like this. You know, there's nothing to grab a hold of. The edge of the frame is way over here, and that's fine. It doesn't have to wiggle much, but you would definitely need to restructure it so that the arrow kind of resides over the top, and you could kind of go side to side. But but we have got horizontal scrolling working. I do like the fact that on hover, we have the ability to go into each of these. If we do we have okay, so this one I can click on. Okay, so now we've got this sliding in from the side, and I think this is really well done. It says that I can expand, and you've done a really good job there. It's interesting when we come back, it gets dark, and so this is a common problem. It is putting overlay on top of overlay on top of overlay, and there's not a whole lot you can do to fix that. And it's almost like we've got to go all the way back out. We want to look here to see. How that overlay is being activated. So here's the overlay prototype. Okay, so we've got this while hovering. So we want to set this to close when clicking outside. But I totally get like what the general interaction here is. It's interesting that like you do not have a background added, but yet it's adding a background. So I'm not completely certain why it's working in that manner, but I oh, maybe it's over here. Oh, okay, got it. So it's yeah. So you're only okay. So that's why it's only adding it here. Is you're only adding that overlay background to the first one, but when it cycles back through, that's a really tricky one to sort through, because if you click on any of them, it only closes that overlay. It doesn't close all the overlays. And I would need to research that a bit further to see if is there another way to get that to happen. But I think it's very clean overall. But we definitely want to take a look at this little interaction here, because it works great on the first click, and then it's like you've got to click outside of it to it. I almost want to switch this to I almost want to switch this interaction so that you have like a close at the end of the cycle. But regardless, I think this is really well done, and that's hanging right now. So it looks like the close button is missing as well. Really quick, Abraham had a question here regarding the click state, and Abraham, the answer is really easy. You need to give feedback wherever possible. The click state is just a split second on screen to indicate that, like, yeah, you have clicked. A lot of times that is just that. If it's material design, it could be a really subtle, great color change. If you wanted to go with something more obvious, it could like invert the colors, like click. It's just there for a split second. I think it's helpful to give feedback whenever possible. Hover doesn't quite do enough because it's already active, and if you click on it 10 times and it may not do anything, and you're like, okay, so what's happening? So I do think the click state is helpful. Maddie, Maddie's doing some UI work, just kind of developing an eye for design and utilizing color and typography. I like the combinations here. I think that the typography is heavy enough that it's going to allow you to separate. That's one of the problems that this kind of gets into. With that Max Mara, the serif that they have, it really needs to be really large to separate. You can see some of the challenges that they face um, when going across the divide like that, because this is really dark light. You're 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 not in the same realm. It's also very handy that you have a brand name that's even. It's like it splits very conveniently there. So that's nice, but it's also like, oh, that of course that works because it splits so nicely. I like the fact that you've got a grid in play that's very much picking up on what they had as well. You can follow it down, and it looks like you may have even, yeah, actually you drew that on top. But overall, I really think that this is pretty well done. The color is subtle. The typography is still, I mean, not the typography, but the images are still the focal point. And I think that's the real thing that is the common key between these two, is that your goal is to make sure that whatever you're doing with the typography, whatever you're doing with the color, the images and the brand itself is still at the foreground. And I think this solution does that. Final bit here, Eddie. I'm going to come back to this. I definitely want to give some more guided feedback when we look at how the baseline grid and the X height and whatnot are being declared on these. I'm not seeing that happen over here. It's like all the lines are still, if I click in here, I can kind of get to them, and I can begin to move these things around to see how this texturina is working. But I definitely want to. And one thing you can do here is if you're having trouble moving these, I would just lock the type itself and then just come in here and like, okay, here's line 4, here's, and begin to move those around, because this is like the cap height, and then this is the X height, and the X height's way down here. So now it's like we're beginning to see like what this typography really is like on scale, and I'm not getting any of that from the way that it was arranged earlier. This is really decorative type. It's not type that I would ever use in like a lot of body copy. I might use it. I might use it in places where you have a logo or something, but these particular typefaces, they call a lot of attention to themselves. Jost is fine. I think you've got a good one there. Tomorrow is much like this Texturina. I probably would stay away from stuff like that. Try Wrong is a serif, and it's okay. It's better than the other two. So I'm gonna kick this back for tweaks. I would like to see one other typeface that you could see utilizing for broad swaths of your design. Texturina and Tomorrow are immediate outs. They're just too specialized. Tomorrow is like a Star Trek type of font, and Texturina is really like a black letter. Give me another serif that you feel could be utilized in the design work that follows, and we'll look at exercise part 2, and I'll give you some feedback on that a little later. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for today's edition of the Feedback Loop. I hope this was helpful for you to follow along. Thank you so much to Maddie, Abraham, Eddie, Bryn, and Ricardo. And without further ado, get your hoodie. I'll see you later.